Yo, what's happening, guys? Good morning, everybody. You guys have tuned in to Rules for Rebels, and I got a couple minutes here on my way to Dunkin' Donuts to kill. So I figured we kind of talk about kind of an interesting observation, an interesting thought that I had recently. And I actually saw this discussed at the LPX conference in Chicago, but it's something that I've been noticing. I've been noticing as well, and it's a huge change going on in the world of e-commerce. And we're not talking about the customers. We're talking about the e-commerce sellers like you and I, and it has to do with the platforms that we're building our stores on. So there's this big, it's kind of already happened, but it's continuing to happen. There's this big change right now where when we're choosing how to build our store or where to build our store, everything's changing from a model of ownership to a model of access. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's think about like the media that we consume, right? Like music, movies, etc. Like, you remember when everyone used to have a big old case of CDs, and you'd have your 3-6 Mafia CDs or whatever you had in there, and you owned your music, right? Well, what happened over the years? LimeWire came out, and then all these streaming services and Apple Music and Pandora and everything else, and now we don't own our music, we pay for access. A lot of us get it for free in return for listening to ads, but assuming you subscribe to Spotify or some other service, you're paying for access to your music. You don't own your music. Same thing happened to movies. I remember when everyone used to take great pride in their sleeve full of DVDs or their DVD collection, and now we pay a monthly streaming service and we pay for access to the movies. And the same thing's happening in e-commerce. So it used to be you download WordPress and you connect WooCommerce or Joomla or some other type of open source platform, and you'd build your store on there, and you had your own domain, you had your own hosting, you kind of owned and controlled everything. And obviously now we all know, what's everybody using now? Everyone's using Shopify, Squarespace, Wix, BigCommerce, BigCartel. We're all paying for access as opposed to owning our own stores. Is this a big deal? Does it matter? That's what I'm curious to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear from you guys. Those of you guys who have a current e-commerce store, did you build it yourself? Is it a custom build? Are you using an open source software? Or are you using an SaaS service or a cloud service, like something like a Shopify or a BigCommerce? Excuse me. And also, for those of you guys who had stores in the past, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, if you had a store back then, were you using Shopify? Were you kind of one of the Shopify early adopters, or were you using your own kind of open source platform? I'd love to hear kind of your guys' thoughts and opinions about this. Here's just one thought I have about this that's kind of interesting. So, like I said, there was a woman from BigCommerce basically kind of giving a speech talking about how great BigCommerce is and how a lot of big companies who traditionally built their own websites or used open source software or Magento, they're now moving over to managed services because you don't have to worry about PCI compliance. You don't have to worry about SSL certificates. You don't have to worry about being hacked. They take care of the security. They take care of all the kind of not so sexy stuff so that you can focus on running your own business. But what's kind of interesting about this, it made me think, one thing we always talk about in business is have as much control as possible. If you got a business partner, try to get 51% so you have the control. Back in the day of blogging and affiliate marketing and stuff, you'd see people on Warrior Forum, Black Hat Forum, or whatever, and they'd be talking about, should I do WordPress or Blogger? Should I do, WordPress, or I was trying to think of another example, WordPress or Blogger, but you'd hear people kind of talking about this stuff. And I remember even when I think Wix was one of the first what you see is what you get type website platforms, but even when that came out, one argument you'd hear from a lot of people is, why would you put your faith in a third party who could raise fees on you, who could take your website down? If everything is owned and controlled by you, if you have some kind of vanilla type content, it probably doesn't matter that much. But if everything's owned and controlled by you, if you have a controversial blog, a controversial store, nobody can take your site down. I'll give you, this is kind of I don't know if you want to say a bad example, but this is kind of not that I agree with this, but basically a company just came out with school shooting hoodies, right? So the hoodie will say Columbine and it's got bullet holes in it, and they have Sandy Hook and all the different school shooting things. Now, obviously that's untasteful and everything, but somebody sets up a store like that on Shopify, you get all the media talking about it, you get all this outrage, and Shopify could theoretically be we really don't want to be associated with that. We're going to take your site down. Shopify doesn't very often take sites down. When people have problems with Shopify, it typically has to do with Shopify payments and not Shopify themselves. But theoretically, Shopify could take your site down, as compared to if you build on an open source platform, you own the hosting, you own the domain, you own everything. Nobody can really do anything to your site. So that's kind of one concern. Do I think Shopify is going to start taking down sites? Probably not. The bigger concern to me is, imagine if tomorrow Shopify says we're getting rid of the $29 plan and we're gonna go with the base plan of $99 and go up from there. Or even worse, what if Shopify, right now, if you're not using Shopify payments, they charge you a 2% transaction fee on every purchase, which is different than eBay or Amazon because they're actually bringing you customers. Shopify is doing nothing for you, plus you're paying a monthly fee to be on there, and they're still going to hit you with a transaction fee. But use Shopify payments, not an issue. Anyhow, what happens if tomorrow Shopify says we're going to start charging a 5% transaction fee to every Shopify store? Well, fuck, that really cuts into my bottom line, right? So now I'm left with the decision, do I go through all the time and effort of moving my entire Shopify store over to another platform and trying to do it in a way that I preserve SEO and keep all my photos and descriptions and everything, or do I just eat it and stick with Shopify? But like when you build your business on a platform like that, you're kind of at the whim of what they decide to do as a company. So just something to think about. Thought this would be an interesting video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button below, and we'll catch you on the next one. I gotta get my coffee, guys.